my name is Aaron Day. This is my entry to Dominic's Workshop's tree challenge, and this is the tree I managed to get. Unfortunately, when I was working on cutting the roots off of it, I was not able to finish that up outside, so bear with me. I think the height of this, once I get that cut off, will be about 6 feet, which would still be a little bit taller than me. However, I think Dominic looks like he's probably 6 feet or more, so I think it's only fair that we get to take the tallest person in the challenge. What I plan on doing is actually I believe it's called a takedown recurve bow, where the limbs are actually able to be detached. So I would use bent lamination to create this curve for the limbs, and then I'll probably just carve out the middle section or the handle with chisels and files and rasps and such. So in the end, we'll see how it turns out, and hopefully it'll be a successful project. Possibly I'll wind up with a bunch of broken wood in my hands. We'll see. So if you're interested in seeing the results, stay tuned. I lease out some of the property to a farmer. A couple summers ago, he dug up a couple of these small trees and pushed them back into what we call the quarter-acre wood. I figured I could find something here which was sufficiently dry to use for the project. I was considering inserting the scene from Commando where Arnold Schwarzenegger is carrying the tree out of the forest, but perhaps that would be a bit silly. Once the log was cut into 2 sections, 2 faces were squared up on the joiner. Pencil marks are made on the face before I do a final run to verify everything is being taken evenly. This little point of wood is used instead of a fence to rip the slats for the limbs. I can adjust the thickness as I run the log. Here are all the slats I was able to get out of the one log. And this is the section which will be used for the stave of the bow. I traced the profile lines of the stave onto the side. The bandsaw was used to cut the rough shape, saving the off-cut pieces. The pieces were then taped back on and the front face was cut. And here are the rasps and files I mentioned I'd be using earlier. This was several hours of shaping, but it also provided the best fit for the hand. A brass brush was used to help keep the gullets of the tools cleaned out so that the tools would remain effective. Sanding the coarse surface left by the rasp was necessary after the shaping was complete. The next step was very labor intensive. I've had these planes for a while but never really used them. Each slat needed to be about 1 mil thick at one end and about 3 at the other, which meant no power tools. A block plane did the basic leveling, where the jack was used to smooth the surface. The curve of the limb was traced out on several laminated sheets of plywood here. The bandsaw, I cut the lamination form both parts to account for the different thickness on each end, and smoothed it out with sanding. As a first project, I've attempted bent lamination. This is an epoxy meant for bows. I suppose it retains some sort of elasticity. The epoxy was mixed and applied to both sides of each slat. Then I used clamps to compress the limb within the form. So what goes in must come out. The epoxy exposed to the air still seemed tacky, but the surface within the form seemed dry. Odd. I roughed out the shape of the limb and the bandsaw. Once I had two limbs, I clamped them together in a machine vise and a C-clamp. Then I used a block plane to even up the edges and get a consistent shape. I then sanded the limbs individually to remove any irregular twist within them. A Forstner bit was used to bore a place for a flange nut. Then I followed up with a wide bit to account for the nut barrel. And finally, a narrower bit for the thickness of the bolt which will be used to affix the limbs. I duct tape the limb to the stave to keep it in place, and I drill through the staves holes into the limb with the smallest bit. The flange nuts were slightly larger than the holes, so I needed to tap them into place with a hammer. Then I can thread the bolts through the holes and into the nuts. With the limb attached, I can test the limb for flex.
Oh, and there we go.
Only one of the three limbs actually survived. Well, thank you for watching. Ultimately, it was an unsuccessful project for the bent lamination. I believe just a series of knots and other weaknesses in the wood just made it so this wasn't going to be feasible with the poplar that I had started with. The stave for the bow seems to have been more or less a success, but without having a set of limbs to test it, I'm not really sure what sort of stresses this would put up with, but it's a fairly strong piece of wood at the size that it is, even with the knots and flaws. Perhaps in the future I'll attempt this with maple limbs and see if I can make that successful. Unfortunately, that would be outside of the scope of the tree challenge, since not many poplar trees have had maple grafted into them. So, go check out Dominic's channel. There's a link below. I'm sure he'll have a playlist of all the people who participated in the tree challenge. Anyway, thank you and God bless. Hello, my name is Aaron Day. Hello. Hello, my name is Aaron Day. This is my entry to Dominic Workshops. Dominic's Workshops? Okay. Gosh, that should be kind of what Dominic would say. Anyway.